As we sit here now, the first thing I'd like to do is touch our sense of each of us, the humanity that we, live with. So just noticing, for example, hearing my voice. As you hear my voice, you're getting to know me. You know how to read that. You know how to, he sounds like this, that kind of thing. And you're looking at my face and assessing, determining, is it worth listening to, or is it good Dhamma yet? Whatever's going on in your mind is going on. And that, together with being in a body, you might sense sitting in a body right now, a body sitting. It's not me in a body, there's just this body sitting here that's being touched by the sound of this voice. That's what we have, that's our contact. Our relationship is beginning to form as I speak. We're in relationship now. And this relationship is a Dhamma-centered relationship, right? So you have some sense, because perhaps it's offered by Beatenberg, that this must be a Dhamma thing. Why else would they do it? Or maybe you've heard of my work or something, but you have this feeling. This is supposed to be Dhamma. Let's see if it is. Let's see what this is. So that's part of our relationship now. In the language of the Noble Eightfold Path, that talking about Dhamma is a practice of right view. So this is our path right now. This is what the path looks like. It's not just when I'm quiet and say, pay attention to your body or something like that. This is Dhamma. This is path right now. Nothing else, just this. And so an inquiry that I'd like to invite us into right away is, for you right now, in this moment that you're hearing these words, and in my pauses as well, do you feel the sense of this being the very tip of your life right now? That this moment is conditioned by all prior moments, and it's like this now. This is how all of that life feels right now. So, for example, as you sit here, do you feel that your family background, your mother, your father, is somehow conditioned what it's like to hear these words and to be sitting in this chair, on this cushion now? So your family, can you perhaps extend that and say, this is how my body feels right now. And so feel maybe, my genetic history is here. My height, my weight, all the food I've eaten, my what sex I am, what age I am. That the eyes through which you see me, the ears with which you hear me, have grown up in that conditioned way, conditioned by your DNA and so on. And like this, we touch cause and effect. This forward edge of the moment came out of the moment right before, which came out of the moment right before, which came out of the moment right before, like that. And here it is. This. So kind of in the way, you listen for a far off bird, or what's the sound of the Alps when there's no traffic. I invite you to listen for this impermanence, for this emergent experience of consciousness. Listening for it right now. Conditioned. Boing, 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 moment by moment. Could any moment not be part of that? Is there some moment that somehow escapes and doesn't condition the next moment? It's an absurd question, isn't it? And yet, we can ask, does it happen that I somehow think that my path, my Buddhist path, my path of awakening, my path of human decency is like, oh, that's mindfulness and samadhi, concentration. That's me at the retreat center or on my cushion at home. That's my path. But here it's clear in the Buddhist, the Buddha's words, I am the heir of my karma, my actions. Every prior action that you've done, every word you've spoken conditions this instant that I'm speaking right now. That you are experiencing and receiving these words right now. That life is like this. It's like this. Pleasant, unpleasant. The mind is busy, the mind is calm. The mind is spacious, the mind is small. All conditioned. Every prior moment. I am the heir of my actions. I will inherit them. Every moment. Wow. Beautiful, isn't it? Because it means that there is no moment that's not path. You see, the challenge of it is that there's no moment that's not path. That it's like, oh, if I'm, spending my time reading garbage on the internet, that's affecting the next moment. That's also true. Would anybody deny that? Shake your head no if you disagree with me. Okay, so you passively agree with me, that's good. If you occasionally agree with me actively, that's also okay, because this is a relationship, So that's the scary part, right? Is that, wow, nothing's left out. So it's sort of like the Christian version of that is, God knows your thoughts. It's like, oh no, does he really? Or does she really? Or whoever was up there. Well, that's a little bit not what I'm getting at. But what I am getting at is that nothing is left out. And yet, our sense of a path is that it's like meditation is the path. And here's the thing. Meditation is not the whole path. And meditation is an important part of the path, right? And a framework for understanding that. And I say this because we're here under the umbrella of Beatenberg, a well-regarded Vipassana meditation center. It's like the role for the specialist in sati and samadhi is profound. Because in the Noble Eightfold Path, if we say this covers all of our lives, like no moment is left out. So, if we had like a sort of a pie chart of life, and let's just divide it in 8, of course, nothing's divided. But then you see that, 1/4 of it is sati and samadhi, and 3/4 of it is right view as a practice, not just as a perspective, but a practice. You actually practice right view, which is what we're doing now. The Dhamma talk is a practice of right view. When you read the suttas, it's a practice of right view. When you reflect, when you speak with your friends about what's going on in this life, what is this nature of suffering and the end of suffering, when you talk about, how do you meditate or anything like that, those discussions are practices of right view, right? And right intention. You have your commitments, your vows, you have your Buddha images or the pictures of people you love. You have the things that you do to cultivate metta and compassion. You have all of those acts of service that you do in the world. These are all cultivating wise intention, samma sankappa, the aiming of the heart. So then you've got right speech and right action and right livelihood. You put all those together and you've got the other 3/4 of the path. And all together, you got the whole of life with nothing left out. And that's the purpose, the point of our time together today. To touch that and maybe, I hope, be inspired by it. Because not only is there that, all this time that I waste, or all these moments of hatred, they condition the next moment. We kind of know that intellectually. Do we feel it? Right? Do we feel inspired to I'm going to watch my speech. I'm going to watch for hateful speech. It's like, tinges it colors the mind. So that's the kind of the dark side, what you might call in English. I don't know what you have in German, but in English you have this saying, there's the carrot and the stick. You've got a donkey, and you can make the donkey go by beating it, and that's the stick. It's the negative approach. Or you can dangle a carrot in front of it, and it goes to try and get the carrot. That's the positive approach. So we talk about the stick, but the carrot, or shall we say the beauty, the reward, is that all of this sense of distance of the path, or difficulty integrating it into our lives. How do I make my meditation part of my life? Or how do I, all of the beauty of retreat, how do I bring it into my life? Or this Dhamma, wow, I don't know how I can live that, but it's pretty interesting. It always, wherever it has felt distant to you, that's an unnecessary construct. The reward here is that you have no choice. You're on the path every moment anyway. It's just how? How do I do it skillfully? Like us recognizing that right now we're practicing right view. To the extent that we're aiming the mind, we're aiming towards something good in our hearts, and like a possibility of our humanity. That's a practice of right intention. It's clear how we're practicing right speech and right listening, right action of non-harm, right livelihood. Yeah, it's a little bit distant right now. It's just kind of in the field. Right effort, like Do you feel your energy in the mind as you pay attention? If you are paying attention, are you paying attention? Yeah, some of you are. Good, great. So let's look at the virya, the energy of the body mind right now. Feel it. Can you feel it? Your own energy. You're not falling over. You're not falling asleep. And maybe you're really paying attention. I don't know. It's kind of hard with this, but I think you are. Look at the virya in that, the energy in that. Feel the effort. Not effort like, that's not right effort. That's just an aspect of a certain way of doing effort. But so sense into that right now, bringing yourself here took some energy. You could have just sat back on your couch, had your next cup of tea, and watched something on Netflix or something, But you chose to do this in a very humble, simple way, but a real way. This is right effort at work. You see what I'm saying? It's like, it's not something else. It's not like, oh, that's not right effort. Right effort has to look like, I don't know, I starve myself to death, or I wear robes, or I go to a meditation center. This is right effort. You could not be here without it. So all of a sudden, we have this great reward of this perspective of seeing, oh, yeah, this is what the path looks like. It's pretty human, pretty good, pretty accessible, pretty workable. Is this clear what I'm trying to get at? Because it's this is where we stand to inspire. So I'd like to invite you in a moment to investigate this in groups of 3. And so, of course, teaching insight dialogue in full, in depth, in the amount of time we have, I won't say it's impossible, but I'll say it really depends upon our shared diligence and but let's do our best, because the insight dialogue here has a purpose. It's not just trying to add something to your toolkit. It's a way of touching a living sense of these Dhamma teachings that I'm sharing, so that when you're going to speak and when you're listening to your spiritual friends as they speak, it's something more subtle than just an everyday conversation. Begin to get the fragrance of meditation that can move right through speech and thereby bring the Dhamma power to it, So at the heart of this is this first insight dialogue instruction, which is pause. Pause is a recollection of sati, mindfulness. And so if you pause while you're speaking, it can cut the habitual speech. It can cut the quality of speech that draws on your extraordinary, or shall I say, remarkable intelligence, where the mind can build up its speech and shoot it out without any mindfulness at all, because we're so good at talking. But we're also very skillful, in a paradoxical way, of living a life of delusion, unmindful, habitual, and speech is part of that. And how we relate with each other becomes more like we're two caricatures or three caricatures, of each of ourselves, and of seeing each other as kind of this, oh, she's a this and I'm a this, and all of those kinds of things. And out comes the speech that's maybe nice, but not with the texture of awareness, the texture of truth, the subjective truth of your experience, that kind of truth, the meditative truth. So pause is the actual meditation instruction. So for those who are new to practice, I'll just kind of offer you a specific way of understanding that. I'll be offering a contemplation about this whole life path thing and how it is alive for you now, and how it's going for you now. And I'll refine that in a moment, so don't worry. So you offer in practice now, I'm going to give you time separately as a speaker, and you'll have 2 listeners, and then there'll be a banner on the screen saying switch, and then you go to the second speaker, and you can spend the first minute determining, saying hello and who's the first speaker. Then the time will start. It'll just be like 4 minutes, 4 minutes, and then the third speaker, 4 minutes. And then you can release that form and be together for, let's say, 6 minutes. And what's going to bring this sort of into life as the beginnings of a meditation practice, and you can explore it as a meditation practice, right now is the pause. So you take this contemplation that I'll clarify in a moment, present it to the mind. How is this whole life path available now, or whatever, and pause. You're so smart. I can tell by looking at you. You're so smart, you'll be able to come up with an answer right away. That's going to be your prefabricated, what I call cooked vegetables. Let's have the fresh vegetables today. Drop it. Present the contemplation. See what's true. Check in with the body. How is this? And be present with that sense of emerging. I don't know what. Let's find what that truth is. Then speak it. And while you're speaking, pause. Because that's the hardest time to pause. That's like advanced practice. And you can jump right to it because I'm giving you the secrets of the trade. Pause in the middle of a sentence, and you make space for sati. See what I'm saying? It's very logical, very sensible, nothing magical other than the magic of awareness. But that's all that's at work, that magic that we all know, the magic of sati. But we need to give it space because it's already here. We just need to open for it and then speak. Now, here's another thing. Pause while you're listening. So you say, how can I pause while I'm listening? I'm not doing anything. What's the mind doing while you're listening? See what I'm saying? Sending up thoughts, judgments, like, oh, that's a great thing that she just said. Or, God, that's weird, or maybe you're beginning to think about, what you ate for dinner. That was pretty good, but I'm still hungry, and off you go. All of those things of life kind of fabricating. The mind is always fabricating stuff and interpreting the world. Pause. And there's a freshness, and all of a sudden the relationship, the space of being together is clear and bright for a moment, or it can be. And your listening opens up, and your meditation continues. The sati, the pause is sati, continues, right? So pausing while speaking, pausing while listening. As a practice, it's actually more important than the content that I'm about to give you. So I hope that's clear as a practice. You can actually offer yourself the word pause. Sometimes it helps to have that handle. It's kind of like labeling in a Burmese style practice. So now I offer the contemplation, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. I've been speaking for a little while about that the path is always happening. Each moment conditions the next. And so there's no moment that's not impacting the mind in its freedom or its suffering. So the reflection that I offer is, where do you see the path, this always happening path, as being alive and recognized? And where do you see it as being distant? Sense into the places where life is maybe more delusion or more habit, and sense into those times in your life that are not only awake with sati, because sati is not just the whole thing. When is your life awake with sila? When are you naturally telling the truth? When are you naturally acting with care and harmlessness? When are you naturally thinking? Thinking is okay, it's part of the path. Reflecting on either Dhamma or, social justice in some way, because that's an act of compassion. That kind of reflection is building compassion, which is a practice of right intention. See what I'm saying? So while you don't maybe know the path as intimately yet, which can feed this reflection, you do know something. So where is the path already alive and operating? And where does it feel distant for you? Take your time, and a reminder, let the pause support you. And when you see your meditation, this is a value, of interpersonal practice. When you see your partner pause, let that brighten your own sati, your own mindfulness. Okay. And again, you will have banners that tell you, when to switch. The first minute is just for deciding who the first, second, and third speaker are. If you only have two speakers, after two speakers, then you can use the 4 minutes plus the 6 minutes for the practice of, the free flow of meditative speaking and listening. This whole life path, close or far sometimes, supported by the meditation instruction, pause. I hope that was fruitful. The thing about the Buddhist teachings that may seem obvious, but we should name it, is that the Buddha was teaching as a human being to us as human beings. Very simple, but it's also very meaningful. If we reflect on how our lives actually are, we see that, life can be complicated. I mean, when the Buddha spoke about dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, pain, he wasn't talking about just one kind of dukkha. It was, he was talking about the whole of the situation of being born human and what that means. For example, I often talk about the sensitivity of the senses and the sensitivity of the mind. And so because of that sensitivity, we're constantly receiving, like you are right now, so much information. And the mind, in concert with all of the hormones and the feelings in the body, experiences the world like this. This is what it's like to be human, that feeling as all of this comes in. And we're trying to make sense of it, and we're trying to survive, and we're trying to get pleasant feelings and avoid the unpleasant ones. I mean, it's a difficult thing because the world is out of our control. We kind of landed in it, first as infants, and it's like, oh my God, what do I do here? And all the lights and sounds and everything. But then quickly, as we're growing and we're forming I think, what is it, a million neural connections per second when we're, a year old or so. I mean, it's just astonishing, the building up of these networks that are trying to make sense of the world and help you survive. I mean, why else is it happening, right? So there's this like a very subtle process of light touching the eyes, sound touching the ears, touches on the skin, and so on. And then beginning to recognize objects, we call that perception, and colors and qualities. So that's perception. And all these things are pleasant and unpleasant. That's feeling. So we have Vedana and Sanya in Pali. And out of this Vedana Sanya flood, or let's call it a river, we're in this enormous river of Vedana Sanya, trying to say, okay, that's a door, that's a window, that's a human being, and stuff like that. And we're saying, am I safe? What is this? Can I eat it? Will it eat me? Is this situation something that I can relax in, or I have to stay vigilant? And of course, if we stay vigilant, we're rewarded with survival. In other words, the one that is vigilant does not get eaten by the wolves, let's say. And so the vigilant genes go on. And those that weren't vigilant, they die out. They all got eaten. So here we are, the result of that, millions of years process of this astonishing complexity of the body-mind, trying to understand and live in the world. And the way humans live in the world, the way we, you and I, live in the world and survive is not alone. Humans alone are very weak. We would have been eaten up, and we would have starved in difficult climate changes, and that would be that. Other more adaptive creatures would have survived. We would not have. What we had going for us was our social capacity. So working together, we could, for example, kill large animals and survive. Working together, we could protect ourselves from packs of small animals. working together, this tribe and this tribe not working together so well, this tribe will win in battle. So human sensitivity to other humans is selected in evolution. So now what's happening is not only are we vigilant, but we're also very, very sensitive to other people. Very sensitive. And we cannot live without them. And it's not just that we cooperate in war. We cooperate in families. We cooperate in love for our children. And we cooperate in compassion for our elders and for those who don't have the ability to survive by themselves. So compassion is also being selected for and built in to the structure of the body-mind, built into the structure, so that there are now within our brain systems, our neural systems, special, you say, circuits or special functions for facial recognition and mirroring other humans and so on, learning from them in this accelerated way. And also the sensitivities are creating, with our sensitivities and our cooperation, we're creating a world that gets bigger. It's not just me, or just me and my partner, or just even me and my family. It's me and my tribe. And as social complexity grows, it's me and my region, me and my ethnic similar people, my people, and others are outside that. So it can be a basis of separation and hatred and competition. But also within the group, it's me and my loved ones, but they're outside of that. Right? Wow, that's pretty rough situation. Kind of a setup for war, competition, and yet also a setup for caring, as long as it's the right people, And this is built in. Not only do our brains have those structures, our bodies have those structures, like the hormone oxytocin, and bonding, and all these things through the whole of the function of the body-mind, we are together, and we find ways to be together. So going back now to this problem of complexity being dropped into the world, we're not just dropped into a complex world of lions and tigers and cars and buses and bombs and guns. We're dropped into a world of other people and adapt and learn. And it's complex. I was teaching, I don't know when, yesterday, day before, and I asked a question to the group. Is there anyone here who does not have in their family of origin difficult relationships happening? And not one person could raise their hands. I won't embarrass you by asking you that same question. That's why I took advantage of having taught it before. But just think about it, Think about your own families. Oh my. Do I have to? Would be one response. And the other response, oh, that's so nice. But then there's Uncle Tommy, It's like, it's just that way. The way I summarize is, maybe you've heard the saying from the Bible, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there am I amongst them. Jesus supposedly said that. I have a different saying. It's wherever two or more gather, it gets complicated. So do any of you have work situations where the relationships aren't complicated? So, just it is that way. So let me ask you, if we have this understanding of the human experience, and the Dhamma is about suffering and the end of suffering, could it possibly be that the Buddha said, except I didn't mean that suffering with other people. I'm just talking about, only your own body, mind, or, you know what I mean? It's not possible. The Dhamma is the Dhamma, suffering and the end of suffering. And here we are looking at all of its facets of suffering because we want to look at the end of suffering together. We want to understand the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path reflects the totality of our lives. It reflects the complications of modern life that have been fabricated by humans. It reflects everything about the internet, everything about the legal systems, everything about structural racism and structural economic injustice. It reflects everything in that domain. It reflects everything in our personal lives. And these reflections are not just about suffering. They're about the end of suffering. And so when you, for example, a moment ago you were in practice with other people, all of those sensitivities were operating. Right? I mean, how could they not? How could they not be operating? And so when you meditate, you pause, you see what's true in this moment, sati comes up. Perhaps over time, if you've meditated enough and you feel enough comfort with insight dialogue, maybe you were on retreat with an insight dialogue teacher, and over time the samadhi actually begins to develop, even when you're with another person. And you begin to see not just the rising and vanishing of thoughts in general, but rising and vanishing of experience in this relational moment of contact, yeah? And what you see into is not just suffering in exactly its forms that you see on a traditional Vipassana retreat, but you see suffering and the end of suffering and the human experience, what it's like now in this aspect of humanity. Our relational, our intrinsic relational nature is also revealed. The value here is that working with traditional practice and insight dialogue practice together, those aspects of the path that are the focus of meditation, formal practice, can do their work, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, right calm, stillness, and concentration. Those factors can develop with a breadth and a depth of application, of experience. So when we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, we say, we already know from what we talked about this morning that the Noble Eightfold Path is every moment of our lives. No moment is left out because each moment conditions the next. We know that already. And now we're saying, oh, okay, all of these path factors, these 8 path factors, have to encompass then everything in my life. Like I said a moment ago, the internet, life in the city, life in the country, life on the cushion, life while I'm eating, my life with my significant others, life in my family, life with money, life with sex, life with art, with psychotherapy. Everything says, how is that path? And we have this opening now to, through relational practice, to bring the fine understanding and intelligence of meditation into the totality of our experience, not just alone on a cushion. And the challenge, the classical challenge, the reason most meditation centers don't invite insight dialogue is because there's a notion that when you have another person in front of you, that it's not meditation or it's not possible to develop sati and samadhi. And that's understandable because of this interpersonal sensitivity. Oh my God, it's like, this is going to be agitating. I can't possibly settle in my mind, and there will be no samadhi. The mind cannot be present with this. It's too much. That's quite reasonable. However, that same sensitivity that is difficult is also the place of the power of insight dialogue practice. Because when I sit down with you, let's say it this way, when we sit down together and we're cultivating sati, so I bring myself into the moment, but now I'm with you, and I know that you're here doing the same thing. You're cultivating sati. So I'm looking at you and you're looking at me and we're pausing. And it's like just by being together in this moment, investigating awareness, just you sitting there is like you're saying to me, are you awake right now? And my sitting here is like you saying to me, my saying to you, are you awake right now? Oh yeah. And you have this reflection of sati, right? So, even as I speak now, my words are pointing us towards this moment of being awake. You know what I mean? I'm looking for some response. Thank you. So there's this moment, and so already our spiritual friendship, which is to say the voice of another and wise attention for right view, our spiritual friendship is helping condition, support, arouse this sati right now. If I just say something as simple as, what are you aware of right now? So why don't I say that? I'll even ring a bell so it seems like real meditation. What are you aware of right now? Perhaps you can see that the answer doesn't matter. It's the question that matters. You see what I mean? That you just look. And what matters right now to what I'm trying to say is even more than the question matters. It's that a human being, in this case me, asked that question. You heard the words and you aimed your mind with sati. What am I aware of now? And you went to look. That's the remembering to look, the sati, the remembering, the awareness to look. So you see the power of interpersonal practice can be that simple. But when it's mutual, it's like this candle in a house of mirrors. Here's the sati, and here's these two mirrors, and the light of the illumination of the mind goes back and forth between us. So it can be quite powerful, and that helps us meet this challenge of interpersonal sensitivity when it comes to settling in meditation. So in a moment, I'm going to invite us to 5 minutes to care for the body, to have, just whatever you need to do for yourself. But what I want to leave you with is this sense of now understanding the fullness of the path, which is to say it's always on, it's always path, skillful or unskillful, and it's a wide path that's always relational. Even when you're not with someone, they're in your minds. We already determined that you're conditioned by your family and your close relationships. So could you ever escape from your relational nature? It's not possible. It's absolutely impossible. So we understand the breadth of the path. Just as the mind is taught, we learn from Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, and the aggregates. The mind is always building the moment, and also that moment is always relational. So we have this sense of acute individuality, like my aggregates. You'll never know what that's like. I'll never know what your experience of consciousness is exactly like, but I will know your humanity, and you will know mine. It's like almost exactly the same when you get down to it. It's, and yet it's radically different. And that's where dukkha and the end of dukkha, this whole thing is like that. So the path is that subtle and that wide. So now that you have 5 minutes to care for the body, I invite you to just sort of go about your house, go to your bathroom, go to wherever you're going to do, go get your water and say, is this path? Is this path? Take a look and see if you can escape it. And I'll see you, it will be 8 minutes, it will be 2 minutes before the half hour when we come back. If you could be on time, that would be great. Thanks a lot.
You are muted.
In a little while, I'd like to invite us into Insight Dialogue again. And I'd like to invite some particulars of the Noble Eightfold Path, and to see how those specific teachings are already alive for us. One of the interesting aspects for me of writing this book, The Whole Life Path, that was mentioned at the beginning today, was starting with an assumption about the path that was really a big assumption, big understanding, I'd almost say, is what it felt like. And then finding out it was almost, how do I say this? It was almost truer than I thought, more alive, more compelling than I thought. And the assumption is this: no moment of life is not path, skillful or unskillful. That's the basics. And that's for the, everything I said about that today, I think has explained what I mean by that. But there's another next step. So what that means is that the Noble Eightfold Path of unbinding, of freedom, of human goodness, that this Noble Eightfold Path, these specific 8 path factors, must cover everything, and that this is possible. So what must be lacking for myself, this is, a genuine investigation in my own heart, not an intellectual exercise. So what I was lacking was an understanding of the path factors that was fit that. Like, I didn't know how that could possibly work out. And that was the challenge, right? That was like what I was trying to understand and, spent many years trying to understand. So think about it. A moment ago we were saying nothing is left out. We already see that the whole of our relational lives is included. We see that our social lives, our lives in society, are included. But how? How does that actually fit this eightfold structure that the Buddha offered? I mean, in some sense, isn't it ridiculous that you would take something as complex as life and say, here's 8 things that cover it. It's something it's kind of absurd. On the other hand, the Buddha was a very skillful teacher. This makes it workable. Not only can you remember it, some of you may know the formula 7 plus or minus 2, 8. It's right in there of the things that you can easily remember, hold in working memory. So it fits that, but it's much, much more. It's that now I can begin to unpack and have these regions that are not separate. It's like right view runs through all the path factors. Right effort, as we saw, like right now, there's an effort for us to explore something and develop our view. So this practice of right view has right effort in it. So those 2 are always present. And the third that's always present is mindfulness. It's like, if there's no mindfulness, what have you got? Habit, delusion. So it's got to be there. No mindfulness, no path. Right? You just kind of go on, and the going on, one moment conditions the next and the next. And if you've kind of had a pretty decent life and your mother and father raised you well and you weren't traumatized and, so on, maybe your behaviors will be decent, but maybe they won't. And certainly if you've had difficulties in life, as we all do, then there's no question that you will behave badly and you will function in delusion. So without mindfulness, it's just that. It's just like, molecules bumping into each other at random. And then you get a life of samsara. You get suffering. You get what you see out there, like delusion, pain. So right view and right effort and right mindfulness run through every path factor. So let's stop a moment and say, what does that mean? That means that any moment at all, you can be doing anything. If you pause and reflect, how is right view, or how is my perspective on life operating right now? And we can talk about that in a little bit. What's the energy and the effort that's at work right now? And how is the sati? How's the mindfulness? Of course, the very fact that you paused means that there's mindfulness. That was easy. And if you notice the energy of, an inclination to what's good, to what's wholesome, that's all it takes. That's the beginnings of right effort. You know what the Buddhist formula for right effort is? Out with the bad, in with the good. That's it. So, abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome. That's right effort. It's not complicated. And it's always accessible. That's important, because we're trying to understand how the path is always alive. So, we got right mindfulness because all we did was pause enough, or we've conditioned enough past sati that this moment of sati is naturally in bloom. It's alive. So here's the sati. That was easy. Right effort. I can see, okay, how is this inclining towards what's good? And, we have to define what's wholesome. That's not always easy, but it's also not as hard as we might think. Does this incline towards the good or the harm of myself, of others, or of both myself and others? That's enough. That's enough. And of course, we can go much, much deeper. What we mean by good and harm. And so we go to the intellectual, the conceptual understanding of, what causes harm to others. We think about it. But ultimately, as we reflect, as we live the Dhamma, that becomes an intuitive understanding. And when we stop for a moment and we sense into the harm and the good, we begin to have something alive in us. But that takes work, right? That's the path. It's not to be taken for granted, but it is available. So there's right effort. It's like, is this going a good direction? And right view is what knows the difference. That's all. It's much more nuanced the further you want to go to understand cause and effect in detail, to understand impermanence, suffering, and not self. Why did the Buddha teach this Dhamma? What's the point? So that there can be freedom, so we can be free and become decent people. That's why the Dhamma was taught. And so, wow, this kind of putting out there the nature of the human experience, as the Buddha did with this astonishing Dhamma. And when we meditate, we deepen that understanding of the human situation. We become more sensitive, more not only aware, but we're developing right view when we meditate. We're understanding something. So that's a formal practice, not only of sati, but of right view, samaditi, wise view, wise understanding. We're developing it by seeing, oh, wow, look at all that anger in there, or look at that greed, moment by moment. Whoa, look at how my mind is completely out of control. I didn't know that before. Now I know that. A little closer to right view. And the effort is made, and up comes, the right effort for sati. In formal practice, it's like, and we go deeper in formal practice. That's why it's such an important part of the path to do retreats and to do formal meditation, because there's a refinement and a touching things that we cannot touch when the mind is full of noise. when it's diluted. We don't see things as they are. That's the definition. And the definition of awakening is seeing things as they actually are. So that's what we're doing in formal meditation, and that's why it affects the whole of our lives. You see what I'm saying? But it is not the whole of our lives. We have to actually perfect it. We have to live it. And that is a continuous practice, whether you know it or not. You know what I'm saying? You cannot know it, and it's still happening, that each moment conditions the next, and that suffering is going to be more or less for yourself and everyone around you. It's not just about you, right? It's like me and all my lack of skill. If I could go back over the road and all the damage I've done and fix it all, I would love to. Too late. I can only love as much as I can now. That's all I can do. I can only try to be skillful now. So, the Buddha gave some real positive words about remorse, about the concern for doing something wrong in the future, and having a conscience about what you've done in the past. It's called hiri and ottappa. This kind of hiri, looking to what you've already done that was unskillful. To feel the pain of that is path. This is right effort. And ottappa, it's like, I don't want to do that again. That's ottappa. And that's right effort. And then you cultivate the wholesome of loving kindness and sila and dana, giving. It's a practice, right? So you do that, and that's all right effort. Right view knows it's happening, and it guides you. And right mindfulness keeps you out of habit. So those three are always operating. So I go back to what I said a moment ago. Any moment that you pause and just look at where is any one of these three operating, right view or right effort or right mindfulness, you will always find it accessible. Including if you're in delusion and you say, a moment ago I was completely in wrong mindfulness. I was like, either I was mindful of something harmful or I was in delusion. You say, okay, good enough. At least I know it. That's fine. That's good work. That's great work, in fact. Imagine the billions of people. Can you imagine billions? It's hard to imagine. Billions of people not doing that. And then pick up a newspaper, go to the internet, go to Google News, and you'll see the results of it. That's what happens. Cause and effect. So now we see these very particular practices that give real power to the path. Right? Speech as a practice to be developed, not just, in a moment. There's intentionality as well as just, folding it in generally. Develop right speech. Develop right action. Profound impact of morality as a practice. And it's supported by the mindfulness, because if not, it's just habit. Supported by right effort. Got to break those bad habits. It's going to take some effort. And right view guides it. How are you going to even know what right action is? That's right view at work. Cause and effect, the impact of greed, the impact of delusion. That's right view. And you develop it, not just on formal retreat. You develop it all the time in how you're looking, what you're reading, the conversations you have, the friends that you choose, where you work, right livelihood, conditions the mind. Your job conditions the mind. Money and your relationship with money conditions your life. Would anybody deny that? Big, powerful force. Sex, money, power. Oh my God. Let's just stick with money for a minute. I spend all this time earning money. How is my mind being conditioned in that job? Do I have to lie? Do I have to treat people poorly at my job? See what I'm saying? So, right livelihood is like, wow. And also, that's how the money comes in. How do you spend the money? That's part of right livelihood too. Oh my God, are you actually going to look at what I do with my money in Dhamma? No, that's private. That's not Dhamma. That's not path. Of course it's path. Right? Wouldn't it be nice if it weren't? Then we could have at least a little time off. But it doesn't work like that. It's all path. So here we have the money thing. Oh my God, that's taboo. And also, I don't know how to approach it. I don't know how to make it path. Well, harm for oneself, for others, for both is the foundation. Non-harming. And then the extension of non-harming to other beings and bringing benefit to other beings, which opens us up into the giving, the dana. It's like, wow, now you see, dana is path. And the act of giving, it's not just sort of like a social nicety. It's sort of the foundation by which we live and work together. It's what allows the Dhamma to continue, for example. But it's also what allows our own hearts to grow when we see people who are in need and we answer the call. And when we spend money on things that don't destroy the planet, because we're conscious of that. We're spending not from ignorance. So all of a sudden we see the connection now to climate change. Wow, the way I live, the food I have, the clothing I have, the housing I have in my life is path. Just like the monks and the nuns, they have their requisites. Right? The 4 requisites: food, shelter, clothing, medicine. We have that path as well. It just wasn't named in monks and nuns' rules of Vinaya. This is our Vinaya. This is our way of living the path. We have to take it up. So now I'd like to invite you into one more short practice of insight dialogue. And the timing will be exactly the same. I would like it to be longer, but we have to respect our ending time for this whole experience. So that's 4-4-4-6. And I'm going to offer you both the contemplation and I'm going to refine your insight dialogue practice a little bit, okay? So the insight dialogue guideline I'd like to offer, I touched on at the beginning of our time together. Remember when I was talking about listening for impermanence, like listening for a distant bird or listening to the Alps? We're listening to impermanence. So, for example, if I pause now and you just pay attention to how the mind and the world are touching, and it's constantly an emergent experience. See what that's like with that pause attuned to emergence right now. This sense of the unfolding edge of awareness, attuning to that, listening for that. And when someone is speaking, like as I'm speaking now, you can practice with me as the object. Notice the impermanence of speaking. Each word I say, as soon as it's spoken, is gone. Gone. And that's the vanishing. Noticing the arising. As I'm speaking, there's this constant flow of what's next, what's next. Right? So you're kind of right at the edge, the front edge of that emergence. So when you pause, attune to emergence, like pay attention to that as your partner is speaking. And when you offer the contemplation to the mind, which I'll offer in a minute, when you say, oh, here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I'm going to talk about, notice the emergence of response. Like place yourself at that edge and see what's true, and then speak. Pausing, attuning to emergence. That's the practice, okay? And the more we give real attention to that practice, the more beneficial will be the actual topic of conversation. Pause and attune to emergence. Okay, so now the reflection I'd like to offer is what one or two path factors are touching you now and inspire you to practice beyond the edge of our time together here, into your life, in other words. I'll name the Eightfold Path again, each path factor, but which two inspire you now to take them up, to explore them, to see where they're at work, and to develop them, to learn about them? Okay? Pause and attune to emergence will support you. So here's the path factors again, just to support a recollection. Right view, right intention, how the mind is aimed, your vows, your statues, your photographs that inspire you, your practices of compassion. Right speech, including everything on the internet, when you type, when you make art, all expression. Right action, every action you take, is it for the harm or benefit of yourself, others, or both? Right livelihood, as we just talked about. Right effort to abandon the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome, just as we do in psychotherapy, just as we do at a meditation retreat, just as we do when we practice love for our dogs and cats and other humans in our lives, when we endeavor to restrain ourselves from something harmful. Right effort. Energy, the life of it. Right mindfulness. And right samadhi, right stillness, right concentration. So as you move into practice now, again remembering pause and listen for, sensitize to this emergent moment. It's the emergence of your whole life. That's what we're talking about here. And this life in the path, attuning to the emergence. Well, thank you, friends. I hope that was beneficial. And I suppose what I hope above all is that this is maybe the beginning of something, not just the end. Uh, that's the biggest gap, right? The biggest gap is at the close in like 13 minutes. What jumps over that gap into your lives? I hope some sense of whole life path as a real possibility. Perhaps the sense of in insight dialogue practice touching something that maybe has a little fragrance of meditation. Of course, it's just a taste, but I hope that it was leaves some sense of that. And before we open to just, I'd like to hear from you any observations or questions you might have. I just want to share that if you are inspired by this possibility, you could learn more about it. You could go to insightdialogue.org for both learning about insight dialogue practice, but also there's teachings there on the whole life path. GregoryKramer.org is another place to go. There are a couple of books, and just so you know, all of the whatever royalties, whatever money comes in from the books is all given to the Insight Dialogue community, so it's not a personal mercenary activity. So those two books, right now, the one that is most relevant to this whole life path stuff is obviously the whole life path book. There's a lot of specific teachings in there that are intended to help this help us develop this sense of a living path, of an always present path. May that be of service. That's my hope, that some possibility opens in your heart.